You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, Cantina Cast friends and family. My name's Albert Padilla, and this is episode 360, Light of the Jedi, Part 3. We a couple days late in getting this one out. We had some technical difficulties on Sunday, but we're well on track to complete this. And I think I'd mentioned earlier on when we said we were going to start breaking down Light of the Jedi that one, we would be probably the most comprehensive show to do so. And two, it looks like we'd be hitting about 5 episodes, and that seems to be what we're on track. So this is episode 3. We've got 4 and 5 coming up. And with me to get through all of that is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good, man. I thought we were like in a circus entry. Come on, come all. Or whatever they say.
I forgot what show I was doing. For a second, I was like, oh, what am I doing here?
Yeah. How's it going? How are we doing tonight?
It's going good. Yeah, it's doing great. We have we got we got an announcement commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Cantina Cast. In fact, let's jump into it if you don't mind.
Yeah. Funny how 10 years feels like 20.
Or sometimes 4 feels like 10. Whatever.
True.
So some of you guys may know or may not know, this year marks the 10th anniversary of the Cantina Cast. Yes, believe it or not, the show has been on for 10 years, and a lot's changed in those 10 years. Especially if you think about like the original 20 lost episodes that are still out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. Those are interesting. And then it turned into more of a SWTOR kind of podcast. Eventually Mike kind of changed it up, rolled right into more Star Wars, general news. Then it went into kind of theory. And so it's just kind of had this natural evolution. I think probably it's safe to say, 6-7 years ago is when I think they found their footing. And the show that hopefully we're doing and bringing it to you guys each week is still in that same spirit, still in that same vein.
We know they hit the big time, though, Albert, when we got a holiday special that they refused to release too.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's when you know you've made it big. When we start pondering holiday specials, it's big. It's go time.
We're imitating art.
Yeah, exactly. But we want to do just a quick announcement of something that we've been working on here at the Cantina Cast for a couple months now. I'm really excited about this. And so this is one of a couple things. There's actually 2 more ideas that I have in the back of my head that I would like to do before the year is over, just again to commemorate that 10th anniversary. One is a logo, by the way. I'm working on a 10th anniversary logo, but Jonesy hasn't seen it. Mike hasn't seen it. But that's in the works and a couple other things. But this one is the one that we were pretty excited about. So we're calling this From a Certain Point of View. And we want to celebrate 10 years of not so much us or this show, but you, the listeners, the supporters. And so what we're doing is we're going to try to do this at least once a month. I'm not sure what the schedule of the frequency will be. It could be every 2 weeks, every week. But we're going to invite some of our most loyal, long-listening listeners, supporters, fans, if you will, onto the show. They get to bring a topic. And Jonesy and I are going to I'm going to facilitate it for the most part. And Jonesy and the guests will kind of break down their topic, whatever they want to talk about, right? We want your perspectives. We want your views on some of these Star Wars topics. So if you can see the little poster that we've got here, we'll put this out on social media this week. We'll start advertising it and throwing it out there. So just stay tuned for it. It should be a lot of fun. And I don't know, Jonesy, if you want to add anything to that. I know we had a chance to talk to our first guest tonight. Right.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting. I mean, it's going to be a different take on it too. I mean, we've got all the characters listed here too, but some of these things are a bit more abstract and really what the Cantina Cast has been about and getting into some of the deeper topics and expanding upon some of the things that we already know. Or that we think we know, but we want to get some different perspectives in. And so we're going to have men and women from across the U.S., maybe across the world. We've got a few overseas folks too that'd
be cool,
or maybe on the list. And so, this is going to be a lot of fun and get a different idea and perspective and challenge you and me on our beliefs and see if they can rock us to the core of. And then, of course, Utini will just tell us we're wrong the entire time. So we're looking forward. This is going to be fantastic. It's really cool to be able to reach out and do this with people who've been with us for so long, because there's been some who have been with us for, we're talking 5+ years at this point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We've had some pretty long listeners, which is evident by the show number there, 360. So look forward to from a certain point of view coming up here soon. We're going to try to record that first episode this week. So maybe next week we'll get that first one out. We'll see here. All right. And then before we go any further, I do want to make a quick note as well, because we have, that's not the right book. I've got a copy here of Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. It's not signed, so don't get too excited. But Jonesy and I thought it'd be a good idea just to give one away. So thanks to the good folks over at Disney Books. They sent us this copy here, and we're going to give that away. So probably we'll have something on social media again, like we did with some of the other giveaways we've done in the past, or the t-shirts that you see on a monthly basis. We'll put something out on social media. We'll talk a little bit more about this on the next show and how you can win it. So if you haven't bought a copy of Into the Dark and you're wanting to do that, and you want to wait just a little bit longer, this may be the opportunity to do so.
It's a good book too.
Yeah, it's good. We have to figure out what we're going to do about that one too. Like how we may go back to the traditional method, since it's a little bit shorter, quicker read. But more on that as we get closer.
Yeah, it'd be a little different episode. I mean, it's a young adult book. Have we done a young adult book before?
Yeah, I think we have. I want to say, I think, isn't it Claudia Gray's? I think all of hers have been.
All of them?
Yeah,
I guess Bloodlines is, yeah.
She's got her first adult novel officially coming out, not Star Wars. She has her first, I think, official adult novel that's coming out here. Not Star Wars related. They had a little, like a press thing for Into the Dark, and she had made that announcement on the webcast. So
very cool.
So good for her. Yeah, that may lead to, the bigger titles here at Star Wars, not young adult novels. Okay, well, let's talk about Light of the Jedi Part 3. And of course, I'm going to bring up that visual. So again, hopefully you guys are enjoying these. It makes it a lot easier sometimes to kind of talk through them.
With all the characters, I was having this conversation earlier today. With all the characters, it's good to have something to ground us. So if you're listening on the podcast and you find that you're having a hard time keeping up, because like we've talked about, there's a lot thrown at us, and where we can't visualize these people in an instant like we would with a Kanan or an Ezra, outside of the normal movie. So jump on the live stream or watch it on YouTube afterwards, so you can kind of keep up and you get a good visual of it as you kind of listen to what's going on. Yeah.
And Jeff already chiming in. You probably need one episode dedicated exclusively to Geode when you cover Into the Dark. He's going to be like he's already a pretty popular character based on the reception he's already gotten. So he's a character from Into the Dark, and he's a rock. So I mean, what more do you want? Right? You can't ask for anything more than that. All right. Okay. So let's pick up part 3, and we're going to start here on the interlude, which is just the Nile. Yeah. And this one, it picks up, I think, approximately 2 days after the first emergence. The impact on Abdalis has just happened, killed about 20 million people, no big deal, and left that planet pretty much reeling and completely devastated. So this was one of the emergencies. This first emergence was one they were not expecting. They thought they had pretty much everything secure, bundled up with everything in the Hetzel system, and this one crept up. And it starts off with this wealthy businessman who, again, it's another one of these characters you really start to feel for, right? He's really he's got all this money, he's got all this wealth. He knows that he's there because of his people, and decides that, hey, I'm going to load all these folks up on all these ships. And, I'm going to load up all my business secrets, the research, the tech, my worth, my wealth into these 6 cruisers, and they try to get out of the system, try to get to safety here. And of course, before they even make it out of there, they're approached by this massive storm cloud. And this is kind of a reoccurring theme, right? Through all of Light of the Jedi, there's a lot of references, a lot of similes to storms and lightning and all that. But it is a cool visual, right? Thinking that you've got space, you've got a cloud, you've got lights in there. There's some Star Trek episodes, even movies that remind me of that. What was it, Eve? Is it Eve, that one space MMO that's out? There's a lot of clouds in space and that sort of thing. But those are the visuals I got there. But how are you feeling about this like theme and, storm, the similarities, the analogies here?
I like it. It's really totally different, because you're like, how the heck is that possible? Like, what are they doing that you actually get clouds in space, or that you get lightning in space? What is it that's so special? We've seen it in atmosphere, and we saw it on, in Rise of Skywalker. So we've seen these different things, and we've seen them in nebulas and whatnot. But for it to materialize out of nowhere, it just also gives this aura of mystery of where these things are coming from, where these beings, or where these ships, and where these marauders, originating. And we start to learn very quickly that they can get in and out of anywhere that they want to be with little to no effort. I mean, they have some dependencies, but I think it's great. I think it adds another dimension to what the galaxy is going to have to face with this group, and say that, how are we going to defeat something that really we can't hit if we, if they're operating in the way that they should, and we can't hit them. We can't anticipate where they're going to be, and they could be very, very dangerous for us. And we were talking last week about, some of the sadder stories in the book. This is really the saddest one in the book, I think. I mean, this one, Charles Soule wrote this character. What's his name? Lawrence Carrillo.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote this so well, because you get this inner monologue or this inner thing, and you can just, like you were saying, you could just tell how much he cares for everybody that's on the ship, trying to do everything he could. He could have cut corners. He could have done this or that, but no, he was going to get them all out. They were going to get to safety. They would rebuild somewhere else. They would figure it out. But this is the right thing to do, because it was just, good people doing good things.
Yeah.
And as you're going to help walk us through here in a minute, it's not even unfortunate, just really downright devastating. And oh man.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, yeah, I can't even think of the right word. I'm going to start getting all teary-eyed.
So there's a lightning that kind of comes out of the clouds. And that was the cool part. There was, he describes that you can kind of see lights within the clouds. They're really not sure what it is. Suddenly a bolt comes out, hits one of the ships. I think it's a lead convoy ship. Marie's Diligence is the name of the ship, and disables all the power. And so that ship's just kind of sitting there floating off to the side, and all the ships are obviously still continuing. And by that point, they raise their shields, and there's a couple more lightning strikes that come out. They hit the ships successfully, but because of the shields, they're able to sustain that. And this is where we get our first kind of visual imagery of what the Nile ships look like. And they're described as ugly, blocky, spikes protruding from them in no discernible pattern, which looks a little different than the art. Let me see. I think I've got it here.
Yeah, the art did not sync up with what they had. It was really difficult to visualize, though, what it was, because it was just so unorthodox, and it just didn't make sense why we would have. I was like picturing Mad Max type of imagery, but trying to do it on a spaceship, and I couldn't figure that out. So I was glad you had visuals in here, but then I was like, that's something else. This looks like Republic type stuff.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I've got one visual for the electric gaze that I use. That's, obviously not from this. It's not from Star Wars. It was just something I found. And that was the closest I could find with kind of sharp, protruding, spiky looking things, right? Coming out of them. But he says that they look like tools that were used to like bludgeon someone to death. These ships that they're flying around in. They've got various sizes. So they've got 1 to 2 person ships. I think what we're seeing here is probably a little bit larger than that. And then they've got one main ship with a massive, that was massive in size. And then every ship has 3 bright slashes or sashes down their sides like war paint. And again, these are the official logo or the official artwork that's been, well, one's concept and the other one's like an official one from the books, but I don't see those 3 markings unless I'm just missing them. But
they make it seem like they're very pronounced. They're very obvious, very clear, and they're very proud. We're going to find out that now they're very proud of their symbol and of what they leave behind, and making sure people recognize who was there and what did it before they kind of disappear back into the shadows.
Yeah, and it's also described that each one of these ships has a strange attachment on the back. It says metal lattice, like a half moon filled with rippling green fire of unknown purpose. And we'll come to that here in just a little bit about what that is. But yeah, and as far as the way the Nile go, like I know there's been a lot of talk about, hey, are these guys really intimidating? Are they going? How can they really match up against the Jedi? And I think we're starting to see, like right now, I think it's fair to say that, yeah, they may not seem like they're capable. I wouldn't say, no, that's actually the opposite. I'm saying what we've seen so far, I get it. A Jedi probably could go in there and make mincemeat of them, right? But it's still early. Like we don't know. Like we're seeing before our eyes kind of the evolution of that, and we definitely see that with Marchion Ro towards the very end of the novel. So I think we just got to wait. I think it's going to start playing out. I think there's still more here that they're going to tease out. That's going to give us, show us where they have an edge or where they have I guess a leg up on the Jedi. We see that with like you said, the cloaking stuff. That would be cool. Like we've talked about that before. Like we don't really get a lot of cloaking ships in Star Wars. There's a reference to it in the movies. I don't know that we've ever seen it in the movies. It was in Legends, but that would be interesting if somehow they were able to kind of use that, use their hyperspace technology to kind of fit in no space, and that would be kind of what we consider cloaking. I think that would be certainly an element to them that would give them an edge on the Jedi. And then their use of like gas, right? The gas and all that. I mean, we saw Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn in episode 1. They had to use that. I mean, they're not impervious to that, so they've got to hold their breath and figure out what they're going to do.
Right.
So that would be another way that they could get by. But I think there's still more. I think there's other layers to them that we haven't seen. I think they're menacing enough right now and creepy enough and eerie enough to at least pose a threat and a potential threat as they continue to develop.
Right. And as we're about to learn out these, or learn out, as we're about to learn, these people don't care.
Yeah.
They do not care. They do not have limits. They do not have restrictions. They are pirates through and through. And we'll get to a few things later on, but just to touch back on Marcion Rowe, we're going to learn really not too far down the road what he feels their place is in the galaxy. We start to get little hints of it, of how he, looks at the Jedi and how he looks at the Republic, and, kind of what his perspective and opinion is. And he grows a lot throughout the book, or his focus really narrows as we get through the rest of the novel. But it's really cool to start to see how he views that organization, because as we're about to find out, they're just all out chaos.
Yeah. And on that point, I want to just kind of touch on some of the stuff that Soul wrote here, or Soul wrote, because I did enjoy this. He says they could be anywhere at any time, appearing from nothing. They worked in space, on planets and cities in the wilderness. They moved like spirits and killed like devils. Whether they actually were monsters or just acted like monsters, acted with monstrous savagery was unclear. What was known about them was dwarfed by what was not. And I think the most important things to take away is that they took what they wanted and destroyed what they didn't. And while occasionally you heard a story about someone surviving an encounter with the Nile, you never heard a story about someone fighting them off.
Right.
All right. So that kind of sets the stage. And like I said, you got to kind of just take it at face value and just understand that we've seen bits and pieces of it. And I think that's going to continue to grow as the story develops. So these smaller ships, they end up surrounding that Marie's Diligence, the one that was kind of incapacitated. And then they fire these harpoons, which I thought was awesome conceptually, right? They fire these harpoons. So you imagine a ship with all these wires in every kind of side of it, and they just literally all turn about face 180 degrees and take off, and that rips apart the ship. So they don't need to blow it. I mean, what they're doing is, really, if you think about it, they're scavenging all this stuff, right? They're going to get all this. They're going to reap whatever they can, sell it off, whatever. Rather than just blowing it up, they're just dismantling it in smaller parts so they can tow it away, which I thought was kind of an interesting concept for them to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that it was unexpected when they ripped this thing into shreds, because you just thought they were going to board it, they were going to pillage it and whatever, but no, they just outright tore it apart.
Right. And Corello is like, he's completely just horrified knowing that, all these people that he just, like you said, had rescued are sitting there, and he was watching all this debris floating around and realized that some of that debris that he was seeing were actually people that he cared about and knew about, were just floating around dead in space.
And he feels so helpless while he's doing it and trying to come up with a solution, but he knows it's dire. There's just no escape. Because like you said, no one survives these encounters.
Right. And that's exactly. That's kind of how this whole chapter ends. They harpoon another ship, and as they're trying to separate this one, pull it apart, it suddenly just ignites, and the whole thing blows up and takes out some of the ships, the Nile ships as well. And there's a moment in there where Corello feels like, hey, this is horrible, this is tragic, but he felt a little bit of triumph in knowing that at least some of these guys died in doing what they were going to do, which leads to them finally boarding his ship. And so he starts handing out weapons. They weren't really made for this. I mean, he goes in talking about how these ships aren't warships. These people that he's rescued aren't really soldiers. They've got some soldiers on there, but I mean, he's handing out guns literally to anybody, as many guns as he can, and then to people who are willing to just fire because they've been boarded now at this point, and they know it's imminent before these guys walk in on them. The next thing they know is there's canisters flying in, there's gas being released, and it says the last line is Lawrence Corello sucked in one final burning breath and knew he would not be the rare few to survive an encounter with the Nihil. And then I thought, in the Twilight Zone, because it was written almost like the ending of a Twilight Zone episode. Right. But I thought it was a really good introduction of giving us enough detail to feel the threat by them, and then understand just how they operate and how different they operate than probably anything that I think we've seen in Star Wars. The closest thing I could think of is kind of like the Marauders and the pirates that we've seen more in The Mandalorian. Maybe some of those guys that we saw in Star Wars Resistance. There were certain elements there that I kind of picked up on. But to your point, I think the most menacing thing about them is they just don't care. And that can be a very frightening trait to have in somebody, whether it's an individual person or worse, a collective, right? This many people that don't care, they don't have any laws, they're not bound by any morals, rules, restrictions, and that even extends later on when we get to how they deal with their own. It's all the same thing. They're very consistent in all of this, and I think that is certainly going to be a problem for the Jedi to try to wrap their heads around.
Right, and we just haven't seen this type of brutality. I mean, when they're preparing to be boarded, and we're like, okay, well, they're going to get on board. They're going to just take what they want. They're going to imprison everybody. They're probably going to execute people, but to just toss gas in there and just gas everybody and then just kind of wait it out is just something we don't see. I mean, I'm trying to think when we've seen just senseless killing before in Star Wars on a scale like this, and I'm trying to think probably back to like the Darth Bane novels where we saw just like killing just for the sake of killing. I mean, we've had a lot of this with the Death Star and things like that. So I'm not missing any of that. But just in a novelization and with a character like more individually. I mean, of course, I guess Anakin with killing kids, but all right, there's probably a lot more examples I want to admit to. But it's just been a while. All right, it's just been a while. So, but you're right. They are menacing, and they are a threat. They came out of nowhere, and they don't care. And when you have a group of people who have nothing to lose, and they're willing to rip your stuff apart, and then go collect everything they want. I mean, that's just brutal on every sense of the word. Yeah. And it's
I mean, they're not playing like the fair game rules or traditional warfare, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. There's no rules.
Yep. Yeah. They're exploring tactics that, again, most, I'm going to say civilized, but most people in the galaxy are they're straight shooters, if you will, right?
Flying rules of combat. Yeah.
Rules of combat. Right. These guys don't abide by any of those. So
right.
That makes
we have it. Right. And we have it here too, right? Chemical weapons are considered
true.
Yeah, I mean, you don't do it. They're sanctioned across the globe, because they're just cruel. Right. And here we go. We're going to go right into that. So It's pretty incredible. It's a good move, I think, actually.
Okay, so this from this part, the novel goes into part 2, which is called The Paths, and picks up with chapter 19 here at Coruscant Monument Plaza. This is actually a picture of Monument Plaza. I think this is some of the concept art from one of the movies. It may have been from Force Awakens. I can't remember now where I pulled it from, but it is official concept art that was released. Mm-hmm. Or this may have been Macquarie, actually. I forget now. Either way. In Lena So as well. So, and this is our first formal introduction to Chancellor Lena So. She's come up in a couple chapters before, but they describe her as, what you kind of see here. She's got the formal headdress on. She's got her 2 Targans as well. These are the big cats. Mm-hmm. And she's visiting Umate or I don't know.
That's how I said it too. Umate.
Okay, that's how I've always said it. I'm sure in the novel or the audiobook, they probably pronounce it differently. But Umate, and you can kind of see it here, it is the highest point of Coruscant. So Coruscant, at one point, thousands of years ago, had a mountainous background and mountainous territory. And because it is all one city, as, what was his name? Yeah, from episode 1 that brought her up. The pilot. Dang it. I can't remember his name. Rick Ole.
Yeah, Ole.
Yeah. As he said, Coruscant is one big planet. And so over the years, they've continued to just build this planet, and they've built right on top of the mountains. So you think about it, you've got a mountain literally that is going down thousands of, or at least hundreds, if not thousands of feet down. I forget 5,216 feet, I think is the total, or 5,216
stories.
Levels.
Yeah, levels. There you go.
Is how they are. And so she's at the very top here, kind of looking at it. And the peak right there is only supposed to be about 60 feet. So that just kind of gives you, in terms of scale and scope, how big Coruscant is and how deep this thing goes. And it's just kind of mind blowing. I can't even fathom something this large, which is really neat. But
it's this almost religious place because, as she describes for us, no matter who has ruled Coruscant, whether they were good or evil or whatever, this one place has always remained intact. So whoever has ruled and controlled, they've respected this place for what it is, as this symbolic, the symbolic thing. And it's really curious in a global city, why one thing to be such hallowed ground, I guess. It seems like a pilgrimage almost, right? And you got to go see. It's almost like in Mandalorian when they went to the Seeing Stone or something. It's like this pilgrimage almost to go and see this thing. It's kind of the vibe that I got from it.
Yeah, she mentions that that now it was kind of representative of choice, right? Because they've made a conscious choice to build around it and not to cap this off, and have kind of dedicated what's left of it, that 60 feet that remains. And so that, and this kind of plays into her choice, right? She's struggling with whether or not what she needs to do. What are her next steps now? How does she ensure the galaxy stays safe, knowing that there's now been this an emergence in another system, and ultimately this is going to lead her down the path of the choice of, hey, we're going to have to close the hyperlanes, and I understand what the repercussions are. This is going to hit us economically. It's going to incapacitate some planets, some systems out there that rely on trade and rely on usage of these routes for medical supplies and food supplies that they can't grow on their own, or manufacture on their own. So I mean, it got some pretty heavy-weighted consequences, but she feels like it is the right thing to do, and they're just going to have to work around those problems. And so that's kind of where she's here and why she's kind of reflecting on it. We didn't get much on the Targons, which I thought was cool. I hope we get to see more of them. I want to see them rip somebody apart at some point, right, in defense or something. Right. But I did find it was interesting that they said they were empathetic. They had an empathetic ability to them, which for being a predator, being able to empathize with victims or your prey, I think is an interesting kind of dichotomy, if you will. But it's
almost this idea of balance within.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Certain animals and whatnot, and I think it's an extension of Lena So, of what she's trying to do. With especially like the great works. And some of her character, like the way they characterize her. When I was rereading some of this stuff, it felt almost like the first time I read it, it was kind of very genuine. But as I read it again, it really started to feel like she's a little full of herself sometimes, right? That she does have a little bit of an air of overconfidence, but then she gets rerouted in what's right and what's best for the galaxy, and her ego slides, it's kind of slides off to the side. And so it's an interesting take for her of where this character is going to go. If I'm assuming we're going to keep coming back to her because she's so prevalent in this book, and I imagine she will be in coming ones as well. So I really want to see it, but I kind of viewed the Targons as an extension of her too, of what waiting and watching, but ready to spring when opportunities, kind of arise.
Yeah, I like that. There's, I think between Lena, so there's a couple like nexus, if you will, in this book, right? There's Lena So, there's the Starlight Beacon, right? I think a lot of our storylines are going to kind of be fed through one, if not both of those, in some way. So it's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and we've already seen that, right? We know that the festival is coming up, right? The Galactic Festival is coming up. That's going to be in one of the books here. I think was it Race to Crash Mountain? Older's book coming out. And they've already made mention of it in this book, and I think in one of the other ones. So yeah, it's a good point. Like most of the, and we'll get to that here in just one second, because they do kind of hint at some of the other things that she's got on her work plan, right? The projects that she's got in the back of her head that she's working on.
Right. I really did like this image. I'm glad you included it, because her pendant really does feel like the heart of the galaxy, and it kind of feels like she is that heart of the galaxy in a variety of ways. She's giving it that lifeblood throughout the body, but she's also she's the expression of the galaxy, and she's been able to empathize with the galaxy. And so I really like the symbolism here as well. And so I like that they're doing this with Lena. So I think it's really interesting, especially we know that there are going to be dire consequences with closing the hyperspace lanes and only being able to get so much stuff out to the outer rim. Yeah.
And I would agree. Like there are moments I feel like she has a little bit of hubris in her, right? But at the same time, it does still feel sincere. Like so far, there's nothing that makes me believe like she's got ulterior motives in some way, or she's really doing it for herself only. I mean, I think she's very proud of what she's done, and she probably should be, given this is like the first time we've had a chancellor that has ever wanted to do good and wasn't just kind of a slumdog millionaire sitting in the back of Coruscant. She seems like she is genuinely interested in the betterment of the people, the betterment of the entire galaxy, and unifying all of them. Right. So it's good.
And so there's a debate in this chapter about closing the hyperspace lanes. One of the counselors or whatnot from the outer rim is there as representation, and so they're debating all of this. And we closed the chapter, and we're not going to close the chapter, but just kind of to close this part of the chapter with her. She understands that if we can't solve this problem with the emergences, and we can't reopen the hyperspace lane, and we have a fundamental problem, the gravity of this is not lost on her, to where she thinks the Republic will be no more. Mm-hmm. She sees this event as something that can tear the galaxy apart literally, and completely cut off a complete section of the galaxy, and just start to disintegrate and dissolve everything that they've built. So she understands the gravity, and I think she's not wrong
Right.
either. So, I mean, she knows that they're on a timetable. She knows they've got to do something quickly. And so she put some pretty aggressive timelines out there too for the Jedi to go figure things out.
Yep. And she's been thinking about, decisions, choices, that kind of thing. She ends up going around the corner there and finally meets up with a number of people. So there's 4 Jedi. She's got Yarrow Proof, who's down there. He's the long necked guy, the core main. You've got Jorah Mali, who she's the Torgruda here, but again, this is from Old Republic, but I just threw that in there. You've got Master Skier, who's there. We got Avar Chris as well. There's also Senator Itzit Noor of Sereno, which I was like, oh, Sereno, that place is back. And he's kind of the spokesperson for the Outer Rim. So he's kind of there acting on their behalf. You've got Jeffo Larilia, who is the Transportation Secretary for the Republic. So I guess the person that would be in charge of hyperspace routes and lanes, right? He's the one that kind of manages all that, has all the data, speaks on behalf of that. And he's kind of the one that's pushing back really about, hey, we can't do this or we can, but here's what's going to happen if we do shut these down. And not only is she shutting it down, but she's actually expanding it because now I think there's a total of 15 emergencies, at least by this point in the book. There's been now 15. And that's 15 over the course of just several days, I would imagine, or maybe it's weeks. I don't know what the timeline is there, but it's enough that she's now thinking, okay, this isn't far enough. I need to extend this net by 500. What was it? 500 parsecs, whatever that equates to. So she's even making it bigger, right? She's casting a broader net for safety reasons,
right?
As these things continue to kind of sail out and expand. And so the Jedi, they don't believe the Legacy Run disaster to be caused by Force sensitive. They've kind of ruled that out. Doesn't look like it was the dark side, right? That hasn't been around for a while. Wasn't Sith or anything like that.
They didn't even mention the dark side, though.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's strictly just the light. I mean, it's very different.
Yep. Yeah, there's all these little cool things like that you pick up and you're like, really? Wow, it's a very different time. Let's just say that. And then the other person that's here is Admiral Pevel Kronara, and he's part of the Republic Defense Coalition. So he's kind of in charge of that. And I kind of saw these guys as like the kind of like the UN, right? Where they've got people from different sectors of the galaxy that have kind of come together and they've created this defense coalition. So in lieu of a formal Grand Republic army or something else, right? This is what they would rely on because the Jedi should technically not be, they shouldn't be warriors and they shouldn't be in the middle of war. So that's how they keep everything in check here. And so Kronara has been placed in charge of kind of policing the lanes, enforcing the ban, which I was trying to like how would they even enforce that? Like, how do you enforce a hyperspace ban? And they go in to talk about how back in, and this is where I'm still getting hung up on hyperspace, but I'm getting really okay with it, and I've got my theories to get by. But the way they explain it now in this time period is before you jump into hyperspace, you kind of do a check-in with these hyperspace beacons. So like there's a one final check, you get the clearance, the coordinates, whatever, and then you take off into hyperspace. And so the way they're policing this is they're shutting off the hyperspace beacons. So this is you're technically disabling people. You're not allowing people to jump into hyperspace. So you couldn't even do it if you wanted to, at least now in this time era. So which, I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the early chapters where we're getting some sense that hyperspace still has some, it's very unknown qualities to many people, but clearly I chalk this up to where they still need help, right? They still need a path. They still need to know the path. And maybe the computers on board, because I don't want to spoil anything. It doesn't seem like the computers and the capacities of technology have got to a certain point in some areas. And computational power for hyperspace lanes seems to still be one of those things that takes a lot. And we've been given that impression because it takes the Navicomputer a long time for Han and all that good stuff too. So it just seems like maybe they haven't condensed it enough to where it's in ships. So you just need an external source to plug it in before you can make your jump. It's kind of like, it's like an aircraft carrier almost launching craft off of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of how I visualized it of sorts, but I kind of like it. I mean, I like that hyperspace is still something that we don't know everything about. And we keep flirting with little things that make it seem like that. But I get the disconnect too, because again, 200 or 300 years before our era of Star Wars doesn't seem like that long ago to where light speed and hyperspace should be a problem,
right?
With as advanced as we have, because we know things don't always advance like that, So But I do like that we still have this mysterious aspect of something, and we've got something new to explore, and I think overall it's still a good thing.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. So from here, we get a little bit more about the Starlight Beacon and its purposes. That is the Death Star there, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But it is so this could serve as a fortress when needed. It was a deterrent for Raider and Marauder activity. So just its presence alone was something. Knowing that there was a huge Jedi contingency force there, and they say it's the largest outside of Coruscant. So pretty big amount of a good group of Jedi sitting there on their vectors, and who's going to want to screw around with that, right?
Right.
On top of that. And I think we touched on this is when we were doing kind of like the High Republic overview episode, but this is a cultural center as well. So they've got all these different, everybody from all over the galaxy has kind of contributed, and you can go there almost like a, cultural art center, if you will, right? You can go there and see what's going on.
It really is Deep Space Nine for Star Wars.
Yeah,
it really is.
That's I forgot about, you brought that up last time too. There's it's a communications relay as well. So out here, we're so far away from the core worlds and the core planets that communication takes a little bit longer. So this acts as a relay beacon for that, which is good. That'd be great if it was a relay beacon. It's got state of the art medical facilities, so which would be nice to have. You think about in real world, it's a big deal. I'm going to speak because we're in Texas and there's a lot of land here, but it's a big deal when you go out to these smaller towns and these smaller areas, and suddenly one of the big hospital organizations sets up a hospital, right? That's a huge deal for them. And people think people really realize that, but it just means their quality of life increases, right? They don't need to rely on, holy crap, I'm 50 minutes away before I can even get to an ER room with the facilities and medical equipment that I need to survive should something go wrong or happen to be. And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. This has got everything they're going to need, and people are going to get healthy and better quicker from that. And then I guess the reason I had the Death Star in here, because it just feels like this is just the complete opposite of a Death Star.
Yeah.
Right. For everything that we've talked about that the Starlight Beacon represents, and the hope and all these great benefits and everything, you had this beacon of light. And then on the same respect, and I've got the visual here of the Death Star. I mean, you see that coming and it's like, it's over, right? And they're two very different, and they probably have all, if not the same stuff, right? I mean, we don't know a lot about the Death Star. I mean, there's plenty that's been written on it, but I would imagine it's got all of these and more, given its size and what it was doing. And so it really was kind of its own little system, microcosm of the galaxy itself, but with, a horrible death ray that would blow up planets.
Right.
But I like the Starlight Beacon. Like, I think it's a great concept. Now, the questions I have is, where the heck did it go? And this isn't the only one. Like, when we talk about Lena Solo's plans and what she's looking to do here, that I think is going to be teased out over the next couple of years and over the course of all the books and everything, she's got more in her mind. And are they going to get constructed? And if they are, then that's even one more that I'm asking, why do they not show up? So what happened to them? There's got to be some great tragedy that occurs that these things get blown up to pieces or bits. And I kind of want to see all that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like the dichotomy of it. It's great I think it's a great thing to see. And we start to learn more about some of her great works too. And we know that we want to have more Starlight Beacons across the galaxy as symbols of hope for everyone. And also, like you said, these cultural centers, these things that everybody can benefit from, and that people will be proud to have and proud to be part of something this big. And as Dale is saying, the Hope Star too, I guess. But yeah, it's very much like that. And so I like the real contrast here we have with what we're used to, and it's just a completely different era. And it's fantastic. But I like that we're starting to get an idea of some of the great works too. And I'm curious which ones stood out to you. I've had two that I thought were really cool. So we had one, she wanted to talk about a mass communications network, which I started immediately thinking it's basically the HoloNet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Does that sound like that one might be?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that sounds like this is the precursor, at least the preamble to that.
Yeah, the inception of it, and this is how it gets started. It's what it sounds like. And so we don't get it called that, but it's an idea at this point of what she knows she needs to do, because they need a way of communicating news and things to everybody at the same time. It really will bring the galaxy together. And then the second one I thought was really cool was they still need to crack the code on back to cultivation.
Yeah.
And I thought this was fantastic, because we already seen one planet, one of the moons has Bacta, and we already know. And when we find a little later, there's another place that's, very protective of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that we're still very early. We already know the benefits of Bacta, but they don't know how to mass produce it yet.
Yeah.
And we keep getting that. And now we have confirmation of that this is not just something everybody has available to them. It's not, we don't have a tank of it, so we can just go dip people in that have been mauled by a giant Yeti. So, I mean, it's just it's cool that this type of thing I think is really awesome, because 200 or 300 years for medical is a big thing. That is a big distance, right? Because we know that medicines can increase, have leaps and bounds sometimes with what we have. I mean, see what we're doing today with this pandemic and how quickly a vaccine was developed when you consider, just what we were facing. But so I think BACTAs are really cool. I'm the only one get exciting about BACTA strips and Band-Aids, I guess. But I just think it's neat that we're able to see the exploration of it, and we get some idea of it, even if it's just agriculture to some people.
I think the BACTA one is probably intriguing to me as well. It's on my top 2 list of these things here. Maybe for slightly different reasons. When we got the Count Dooku novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the, was it a radio drama? I don't know what
Jedi Lost. Yep.
Yeah, Jedi Lost. But there was they started mentioning there, like we got first wind that BACTA was something that was up and coming. For me, it goes back to, Legends and SWTOR and the Old Republic, and the Selkath have been the ones, and we're going to talk about them because actually they brought them up. I was like, I can't even tell you how many times there are Old Republic references dropped in here where I was just like, gushing. But that was definitely one of them where they officially mentioned the Selkath and how they were, they've got the market right now on, they haven't said the name, but it would be Koltov, right? Is what was used before. And they ran the market. They cultivated it. They ran the market. It was all over the planet. They owned it. And you had something like BACTA coming in. And again, we don't have a lot of canon history here, but in Legends, this became a very contentious kind of market now for what was better, Koltov versus BACTA. So that's great. I mean, I'd like to see that play out a little bit more. I hope we get more Selkath in it. They're a really cool race. Their planet's really neat looking. I think I got a picture of it here a little bit later from the Old Republic games, but that was one of them.
I think we're going to see, I'm actually going to say, I think we're going to see BACTA wars over this.
Yeah.
When we start to see Distance in the Galaxy, I think this is going to be one of those catalysts that picks up momentum.
Yeah. Well, that'd be great. And I would agree. There's a mention of the new treaty between Quarren and Mon Calamari.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, good grief. Like, these guys have been fighting just as much as the freaking Jedi and the Mandalorians, or the Sith. I mean, they can't figure this crap out because we get the Clone Wars and they're still fighting. And I think that was the last time officially, but I mean, it just seems like history has been repeating. So again, they've been in battle for a very long time, but we'll probably see some of that. You said the ongoing construction of the relays in the galaxy, the Republic Fair is coming up, which is not very exciting, but I get it. It's going to be the basis and the backdrop for some of the, upcoming books and that sort of thing. And then, we talked about future beacons coming up. And I think she said her greatest accomplishment would be bringing the Republic from the core and making a truly galactic entity, right? So that, again, it speaks to her vision of really unifying, and it doesn't matter if you're in the far reaches of the outer rims or the core worlds, we are all connected, and she's kind of creating this internet, right? For lack of a better term, to kind of interconnect everybody and bring everybody together, much like we see today with our own world. And I just want to close on this part before we move on. The passage says the Starlight Beacon symbolized everything she wanted for the Republic, and every member of the Senate knew it. If it succeeded, the rest became that much easier. If it failed, and it just trails off at that point with a line. And I think that was, again, it's no surprise. I think we are definitely going to see these things fail. Not necessarily maybe at launch, because it launches just fine. But we're going to see the failure of a lot of these things and kind of what I think leads us into, not directly into where we get to with the Phantom Menace, but these are certainly preambles, precursor events. They're going to lead us into that.
Absolutely.
So she charges all of them. So everybody that's still here, I was going to show that. So everybody that she's speaking to here, she charges all of them with a number of questions that they need to find answers to. How many fragments remain of the Legacy run? Can we predict where any remaining emergencies might happen, right? She's trying to proactively get in front of this so they can stop other systems from being devastated, other planets from being devastated. And then most importantly, what actually happened and why? Is hyperspace safe, or is this all just beginning and getting started? And these are very good questions that they need to answer. I mean, there's some really good root cause analysis that's starting to happen here. That's picking at my technology brain. But she gives them 30 days. She gives them a deadline. They've got 30 days, which coincides with the official opening of the Starlight Beacon.
Right.
And she's pretty much said, you've got full resources, right? Of the Republic are completely at your disposal as you need. And she ends with, figure this out, my friends. I believe you can. And then she says, without hyperspace, the Republic falls and dies. They have to get this figured out.
Yep.
So, and then, it ends with Umate in a great line again, says, there was nothing so big it could not be swallowed up, nothing so strong that it could not be humbled, nothing so tall that it could not be made small, not a mountain, not a republic. Right. So going back to Umate, and as big as it was, as in thousands of feet huge, that thing was consumed eventually, as were the Jedi, as were, Qui-Gon's whole thing about there's always a bigger fish, right? There's always somebody out there, always someone that's trying to take over, and no one's safe. And so she understands that. And I think that's kind of cool that the symbolism of Umate, is directly reflected in that.
Right. And I kind of summarized it in my head as time consumes all things eventually.
Oh.
It's the one thing that you can't stop time. It will change. It has to change. And things will crumble and fall apart, and then they'll be rebuilt in a different way. And she understands that. She recognizes that. And I think this was really well written by Charles Soule in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. There were some good passages in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, chapter 20. This is on the Hetzel system. This is the third horizon once again. So that's the visual of the third horizon, which we've talked about, but really kind of a neat concept.
No, that was the ship.
Oh, well, this is the legacy run. Sorry, that's not the third horizon. That's the legacy run. They're on the third horizon, but I had the legacy run on here because they're actually looking at this thing getting rebuilt, right? They've got these droids. Right. So you've got Elzar Mann, Evan Tarr, Avar Kriss, Jeff O'Larilia, who we just talked about, and Senator Noor, and they've got these assembly droids that are kind of just floating out in space, and they're taking all the remnants that they've been able to recover, and anything that's remained, and they're trying to reassemble this and trying to, put a picture together, put the puzzle pieces back to the puzzle, and try to figure out, okay, is there anything we can discern from this that'll help us, figure out why this thing happened? Was it intentional, accidental? Where it could be leading next, that kind of thing. And they said they've only recovered about a third of the craft. So if you imagine about a third of this is all they've been able to find, that's a lot of ship, right?
And you can see why they're still worried.
Yeah. And there's an interesting part. And so I'm going to use this guy here on the far right-hand side here as Evan Tarr, our chief technology person that we all like now. But Noor makes an interesting assumption. He says that, this doesn't, he assumes that someone did this intentionally. And he makes a good argument because he's saying that there's, they're the agricultural heart of the galaxy, right? So there's a vested interest in somebody that really wants to kind of cripple the galaxy or cripple the economy or, ransom the galaxy in some way. This is kind of where they would want to go. This is a good spot. It could be the core that maybe somebody in the core worlds are upset because of the amount of money that they're producing. So there's a reason for that. And this is where he mentions at the cellcast, right? It could be the cellcast that are at the beginning. They're trying to stop the production of Bacta because it is going to cut into their profits. And they've, again, run the market on Koltov or whatever they're going to officially call it, for medical supplies and relief and all that. But all three of those are very valid arguments that I think that he makes here.
Yeah, I mean, they counter this because with a little bit of logic and reason, though. Why would you? It seems to be all over the galaxy. They've had emergencies in other places now. So what sense does that make? And why complete annihilation? It doesn't seem like you can control it. So the other opinion of it. You kind of start to feel why the Jedi have dismissed that idea more or less. And again, they look into the Force and the Force isn't telling us anything.
Yeah.
I don't think the Force is even leading them a different direction, but the answer is open ourselves up to it. And we've not got that feeling or impression that there's something nefarious going on, directly associated with the way that the ship has fallen apart and things like that.
Yep. We get the, so Elzar Mann, I got a picture of him. Now here's the cellcath right there that I mentioned. That's what they look like right there on the left-hand side.
We would try to describe it for the audio listeners, but I don't know how you do it.
It's almost like
a manta ray.
Yeah, like a manta ray head with 3 fingers. It's bipedal, so it's standing up on 2 feet.
Kind of like on an avatar's body.
Yeah.
Or the movie from Avatar, whatever the blue things were called.
Yeah. And they live on this kind of like a water planet. There's lots of water, very high-tech looking thing, almost kind of like Camino in terms of its aesthetics. very similar to that. Okay, so and then I've got the droids down here because that was, what's his face up there? I forget his name. Tar, yeah. Excuse me. Where were we? Oh, Elzar Man. Yeah. So Elzar Man, he does things in this novel, and I know I've said it before, and I'm going to continue to say it until I'm either proven wrong or something happens otherwise. He does things that are just, and I get it. He is a maverick, and he's a little bit different. But I don't know, man. It feels like the writing's on the wall. Either that, or I'm just getting hooked by Soul, and he's really going to pull a fast one on me and say, you thought this is where I was going, but it's actually Avar Kriss, right? Hopefully that's not the case, because that would just devastate me. But yeah, I mean, like he puts his fingers over the senator's mouth. Yeah, like shuts him up, and it's just like so unorthodox for what we would think a Jedi would do and behave, and right, the behavior isn't.
And the whole room is just stunned that this happened.
Yeah. He tells him, he puts his hand over his mouth and says, "Shh, we're moving. I promise, just not in ways you can see. The Force doesn't feel the need to announce its actions; it just acts." And even that statement alone is just very like. I hate to say the word absolute because it's going to, stir up, quotes and theories and all that. But, it does feel like he does speak with a lot of absolution in some of the things he said. So it could just be confidence, right? But when you couple that with, he likes to practice he even calls it a Jedi mind trick. Like he has no qualms about it. He doesn't call it the Jedi, was it the mind touch, right? He's like, no, this is a Jedi mind trick. I'm going to trick you into doing something, and then the way he sees the Force is this big rolling, roaring sea, and you think about the sea, it's certainly light up top, but dark down below. And okay, what does that mean? What's the symbolism with dark down below? And how far does he go? We know he goes a little bit further than other Jedi do, but I don't know. It could be nothing. But he even says that he was going to do all of that. He was going to try to use the Jedi mind trick, decides not to because Avar Kriss wouldn't approve of that. With everybody around, but if it was probably just him and her, he probably would have done it. So he seems to just kind of, run on the line there. He's not worried about riding the fence or towing the line just a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And we got the flavor of this early on in the book where we know that he'll maybe when the situation is critical, he's not going to do anything super crazy. But in these other moments, he's willing to push the line a little bit. And I read it a little bit differently, I think, than you did when he put his hands over the senator and shushed him. The way that he said that, I envisioned it more as a calming voice of enlightenment a bit. I mean, it was a bit of hubris behind it as well. But I think all of this is also just core religious belief of sorts, that they have so much faith that the Force will tell them what needs to be said when it needs to happen. And when it's right time for them to do something.
Yeah.
And so I think some of it's just core belief, but I also saw some of it as a bit of a, calm down. Like we are on it. We are working on it. We're going to figure this out, but we don't need to be excited about it and start coming up with theories that, could really amp people up even further. People are already in crisis. Now we're going to say we're under attack. That seems like confirmation when it comes from, your leadership, even if you're speculating. And we've got to be very careful of that. It's a very sensitive time for everybody because people are just in complete panic. But I like Elzar Man, though. He also had this quote. He's like, if you can use the Force, you should use the Force. And we've seen other people have the same ideal that why shouldn't I be able to use it? Just because I can pick up a spoon, why can't I use the Force to pick up the spoon?
Yeah.
Why would I? I mean, it's not like I'm abusing it or anything else. And it's an interesting debate even back then, apparently, of, should you use the Force if you can? It's not like it's got I think when we got the symbolism and the visualization of an ocean, it doesn't run out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that was a little foreshadowing for us at some point too. Just a small comment that say, the Force is you don't have to replenish the Force. It's always replenished. You have to replenish your ability to channel it. But so I'm wondering if that was a bit of little note of something that we need to just keep track of as we progress through the next few years.
Jonesy, would you say it's unlimited power?
Unlimited.
Maybe. No, all joking aside, well, maybe not. But I get it. I'm with you. Like in some ways, that line felt very reminiscent of like Mace Windu, have a seat, right? Like we're done talking here. I'm not going to listen to what you have to say, and it's I know better. And I trust in the Force and that kind of thing.
That's a good
the what?
That's a good simile. I hadn't thought about.
The only other part that in at least here, and again, there's plenty of instances in this book where I'm scratching my head at Elzar Mann and wondering where he's going to go eventually. But the only other part is he mentions that that he's been put as like he's been paired up with Avar Kriss. Like she's picked him to be the person that she wants with him to kind of do the detective work and the discovery as to what's going on here, right? So they've been paired up. Now there's a love interest that's kind of brewing here that they're not so shy about a little bit at the very end. I thought they were just going to jump in the sack at the very end of the book. But we'll get to that at some point. But so there's that element. I think Avar Kriss is like, hey, we can like working with him. I like him, that kind of thing. But she says that this is also part of it because he's been trying to make the rank of master, and he's been overlooked so many times because of all of this, unorthodox way that he goes about using the Force and just his Jedi practices and all that. But she's paired them up to kind of give him an opportunity here to kind of shine, and put his best foot forward, and show the council that he's ready and he should be at least considered for the title of master. And it's the next couple of lines when he's talking about why he wants to be a master that I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, dude. You're like, this doesn't sound right. He says one of the most appealing things is that when you're a master, you get to pursue your own studies, right? No one's checking you. You don't have to worry about what you can and can't do. It's kind of a free open market, if you will, on going out and exploring the Force however you would like to. That's kind of a red flag for me. Then he says you get to move. Yeah, he says you get to move through the Force on your own terms. So this goes back to the control. I think of on your own terms means okay. So to what extent, right? Is how far are you going to go on your own terms? Because at some point, I think you cross that line into the dark side. You cross that line over to a Sith or dark side user, and you're really trying to control and manipulate the Force. And that is your own terms, like completely 100% your own terms at that point. It's no longer the will of the Force. And then the last thing he says, it sounded like paradise. Like all of this, having the title of master, being able to pursue your own studies, being able to use the Force however you would like is a paradise. And that was like, okay, that's, Paradise Lost. You think about you think about a lot of what paradise means in literature and how people pursue it. And, all the things that can go wrong with that. It's just, I don't know. I keep getting these little bricks put in that make me think there's a story building here. But again, I could be wrong. I don't know.
No, I mean, they're certainly laying it on thick at the very least, because he also had one of those Anakin moments of it's not fair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not quite like that, but that's the theme you keep hearing over and over and over. And then you're right. He has all these, it was very reminiscent of Dooku Jedi Lost, where they're tinkering with things that there's inherently no harm with, but the further you get into it, the further that obsession might come forward. The more you get into it. And again, he just wants to do whatever he wants and have free reign. Now, I think that's how you get innovation though, too. Right. Yep. Yes. And that's how you push the boundaries. That's how you learn. So I don't think it's always inherently bad. And because this could, if we want to, I'll play devil's advocate with you for a second.
Yep.
It could be whatever he comes up with and whatever he figures out, and those differences save the Jedi and save the light and resist or save someone else from the dark side. And that just that different mentality, that different way of thinking is what is something of benefit, even though we're laying it on thick that's a bit dangerous of what he's flirting. And you're right. Some of the language he's doing is absolutely dangerous, especially the Paradise comic. Because I was like, okay, I'm kind of, all right, maybe. Yeah. And then I laid that. I was like, oh, we'll see you on the other side, Chief. But I really do. I'm trying to just be positive too. It would be really cool if he was the character to do something really, really good, because he would push those boundaries and to be able to see something again that we're not going to expect to see. And I think that would be really cool. And it sucks. I agree with him. It's garbage. If this is the reason why he's left off the council, then the council is already starting to lose its way. Right. I mean, that's personal opinion, but it kind of feels that way already, that, that if they're afraid of this, why not? I mean, and maybe they're afraid of all that freedom too, right? And they're concerned about it, but yeah, I mean, his deeds are all there. It's not like he's done anything. It doesn't sound like he's really done anything drastically bad.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I don't,
sounds like a grudge at this point.
Exactly. Maybe they're of the same opinion that we are, or at least I am, that, hey, there's some red flags here, and let's, just not yet. We're going to continue to keep our eye on you, or treat them like Anakin.
It's been years, though. I think if I remember that right, I think it's been years since his peers were masters.
Yep.
So it's very, you start to feel that bit of jealousy of sorts building, and that's been there and it's starting to fester. But so,
Which
I mean,
again,
there's a
yeah,
lot of
those are all,
credibility here.
yeah. There's probably a bit of jealousy. I would say there's probably even a little bit of well, I don't know. Jealousy is probably what comes to mind. But all right, let's move on because this is a good conversation, but we're already at an hour. We've got a lot of chapters still. Okay, so they're in search of the flight recorder, which I thought was okay. That makes sense. I guess they had that technology back then too. But and the Kevin Tarr brings up that, hey, we need to find this. I have a way to find it, but I'm gonna need a lot of droids to the tune of like 20 to 30,000 droids, Navidroids, if they're new. And if they're not, he's looking for about 100,000 droids if it's an older model, which is a lot of droids to do this. So again, this all calls back to the computation power that's going to take to kind of plot where the emergencies could happen and the trajectory of where some of this debris may have gone, given where it was, detonated, where it blew up, or where they suspect it blew up, all that. So he's going to put all that into some kind of a math, right? A math. That doesn't even make sense. He's going to put all that into a math. And so there's the droids down there. I don't know why there's a BB-8 unit there. But then Eva Chris starts to wonder if there's a larger systemic issue with hyperspace. Like, do we have a larger problem with hyperspace itself? Which I thought is very intriguing because hyperspace takes a full front seat here in this novel out of the gate. And Senator Knorr suggests that they go seek out none other than the Santeca clan, which brings us to our buddy here from the Force Awakens. And so we learn that the Santecas are still around in this era, 200 years prior to the events of Phantom Menace, and that they were prospectors or they were explorers. They were some of the very first people that went out and charted and found hyperspace lanes and routes that were safe for travel. They ended up selling these, to governments and whatever to make money, and they're very, very wealthy because of it. They also mentioned they're an odd bunch, which I thought was an interesting characteristic to label them as. And then finally, it ends with them just saying, like, no one understands more about hyperspace than the Santecas, which I think plays, it's a nice little kind of handoff when we get to, they're looking for Luke, and how do we get there? There's probably some weird way that we got to get to Octu, and it turns out that Lars Santeca is the one that, is the one that had the key, right, to make everything, what does he say? This will
make everything right.
Make everything right again, or whatever. Yeah. So I think it's a nice way to kind of bridge those two together. But I was surprised, honestly. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, and you could also start to make a connection with the Wayfinders that they did in Last Skywalker. I mean, so you could start to tie some of that stuff together, and that would make sense that the Wayfinder was a way for people to navigate through this uncharted space, and that they had a path in general. And so there could be a connection there. I mean, clearly this would have to be for dark side purposes, but it's still. Yeah, it's still an interesting swing on it, and it's good to see familiar names pop up. This isn't one of those eye-rolling moments, and the way that they portray these characters really is done pretty well. So, we'll get to know them a little better as we go on.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's move into chapter 21. Wow, we did that chapter pretty quick, actually. So this is our first introduction of the 3 Tempest Runners. So if you think of these as guys as like the generals of the Nile, right? And then you've got the Eye, or the Eye of Nile, which is Marchion Ro. So we're going to just briefly break these guys down a little bit here. You've got Pan Etta, who is the Duutin on the right. So he's the big meathead-looking guy.
He's the muscle.
He's the muscle, yeah. He said he's wearing turquoise leather armor, which, I went back and I was like, really? He's got turquoise leather armor? Like, I can't imagine what that looks like. But
they are all have their things, and when you get fat, dumb, and happy of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Of the spoils of war and the spoils of pirating, you have eclectic tastes sometimes.
Right. I don't know. I want to see a visual of turquoise leather. But yeah.
I want to see you in turquoise leather.
No, you're not going to see that. I don't know. I'll do a Photoshop somewhere. This is, but for being like the muscle, the meathead, he's a planner, which you're going to like. He's a planner. He's very precise about the way he goes about everything he does. We see that throughout the rest of the book and how he approaches Marchion Ro and approaches things. He's not a knee-jerk kind of person. He wants a plan. He likes talking about things and working things out before we just kind of jump in, as opposed to somebody like Kasov, who's the Weequay. And I don't know if that's a Weequay underneath there. I was going to put a pic. What's that?
Sure doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I meant to throw a picture in there about what he would look like. I don't know. That looks more like
Zabrak or something.
yeah, maybe like a Zabrak, right? Because of the body tattoos. So, but like Kasov, who's like he's very old, he's a loudmouth. They make mention that he's always kind of talking first before, saying, or he says a lot of things before anybody else does, right? And sometimes he's just talking to hear himself talk, kind of thing. Kind of like me.
He's like a not clever Hondo.
Yeah.
And not near as manipulative as Hondo.
Right. He's the opposite of Panetta, right? He's like his people are chaotic. They're very knee jerk. They're very impulsive, and they're always high on smash, which is a drug that comes up here, right? They're always constantly high, whether that's weed, coke, I don't know, whatever they're doing.
It's they get messed up.
Yeah, pretty heavy stuff. And then kind of on the probably in the middle, I guess, of both of these is Lorna D, and she's the one that they always say you got to worry about the ones that are quiet. This is her, right? She's a Twi'lek there. She's very thin, very cold, calculated in her approaches. She doesn't say a whole lot. All the people that she's got under her wing, they're very subtle, they're introverted, but they're all the cruelest of the Nile. Like they are the worst of them. And we see that, right? And certainly the way she speaks in some of her actions a little bit later. And then we'll talk a little bit more about how the structure here in just a second. But then we end with Marchion Ro, who is the Eye. He's of an unknown species. They said he was slate gray. I thought I did not put that picture in here. Bob Saget. I meant to put a picture in here. I had one of a slate gray creature. If you imagine like slate gray, I think of like the. Did you ever see the more recent Alien movies?
No.
There's I forget what the race was called, but they're just all gray, bald, and they have like black eyes, and that's kind of how it was described to me as I was reading this.
Okay.
But that's what he looks like, and he takes his helmet off. Like he's no qualms about taking his helmet off, which I thought was good. He's not one of these characters that kind of has it on and sits on his head all day long. But he's very obviously in control, always thinking about the next big thing, which I think is a characteristic that is going to be huge for him. His father was the Eye. So long before he had this helmet and was the Eye, his father had that mantle and had the title before he died. And there's a lot of history there in terms of how he died and who he suspects killed him. Right. And then when he passed on, Ro kind of took over. And it's weird. And this is one of the things we talked about earlier on in this novel about how his character develops. Like he is very unassuming here, I think. I mean, yeah, he's got his moments and, he's kind of running. He gets to call the shots because of the paths and all of that. But at the same time, like he's not really in control, right? I mean, the other guys are technically in control. They're the ones that are executing. They're the ones that have the teams and all that. He just happens to have the keys to the paths and knows that they rely on him for that. And because of that, he gets his share of the money. But he's not really like, a warlord or a dictator or anything. He's trying to work with them on this stuff. And his character changes by the end. Like there's actually a pretty big shift in terms of how he goes in his relationships with all of them. But very unassuming here. I think he's just kind of like, I was like, oh, this is kind of a letdown. But again, changes a little bit later. But thoughts on these guys, all of them, really?
Well, yeah, and we're going to see the cruelty here in a minute too of how the Nile work when something doesn't go to plan. But yeah, I think Marchion Ro had the same original thought and feeling when we are introduced to him. He just was unimpressive. He was just sitting back saying, "Yeah, I don't really have any say in things. I have a vote, and I'm the tiebreaker, right? So if they tie 2-2, whichever way he voted is the one that he went." But it was just again. We had no idea that we had no ambition. We had no real anything else. I mean, he was looking out for things, but he had little interest. And so the one thing I saw that did give a little bit of hope was he had very little interest when all of the Nile were celebrating and just partying it up and everything else. He didn't even wait for it to start. He was already walking off, to go do his own thing. And that's where we knew something was going to be different. And we are going to get a very different character as we go on. And of course, then we get into this discussion where he invites the Tempest back there. But yeah, and then we get into how the Nile handle problems, right? So we talked about one of the ships was destroyed earlier, right? And how that was a miscalculation. And when there's a miscalculation, you lose that share. The Eye lost his share, right? Mm-hmm. And there must be consequences. The debt must be paid. And so they come up and as part of Lorna D's crew. And they already died. And of course, no one really wanted to admit it at first. And then the guilt, I guess, just overwhelmed someone and said it was mine.
Yeah. Right.
right? Which I'm like, okay, but so they have to atone for what they do, and each one. And Lorna D is just cold as ice. She's like, he's telling her it came from your clan. She goes, go for do as you will. And we start to learn how they handle it. Even though someone died and paid that price already, there has to be an example made in front of everybody else of what happens when you fail. And we don't really know the specifics as the eye is walking away. He casually sees a body floating out in space. So,
right.
In no space, as we're told it's called. But we just see the brutality of them, and then they party right back up like nothing happened, nothing's wrong. Enjoy the spoils, guys.
Yep. And that was, I don't know if that's what Dale was alluding to, but I stuck the little guy in there for
from Among Us.
Yeah, because it's essentially what they do. They just jettison him out into space. They pick him out and they jettison him. And I was like, oh, that's relevant considering what's going on right now with that game. But yeah, to your point, and I wrote this one down too because it kind of stuck with me. It says every Nihil was expected to contribute. Either you made the organization richer or you made it stronger. You make it stronger by removing the weak, and that's what they did. They removed a weak person. At least they felt better about it. I would argue that he was necessarily a weak person. He could have been a great person that just made a mistake, but that's not how they see it. You said they don't care. They're going to take action, and they've got to make an example of it so people don't do it again.
Right, and we find out the harpoon just hit too close to the engines, and that's what caused the ignition of the fireball.
Yep. There's another ship here, just quickly at the top right hand corner. This was the concept art. This is actually the ship that shows up in the little kids book, and I don't know if they're giving anything away, if they were trying to intentionally, but if that's the case, then that ship was parked in. So going back to the very beginning. With the Legacy run, it saw something that they were quickly approaching before she tried to divert it, and the ship broke apart. This is the exact same thing that was in that little picture book, but it could just be a placeholder. We don't officially know yet in terms of what was it, but interesting that was the exact same design. And this was the closest I could come to something that was kind of like a Nihil looking ship like this. So I'm calling this the Electric Gaze.
Yeah, that's a lot closer to what I had in my head than anything else.
Right, before we get to there, let's see what else. This chapter kind of ends with Ro pulling all of them together for a quick meeting. And he's concerned that they're creating too many waves. Like they already want to go out and do more stuff. They've just had this massive, run in with the Jedi. Now they're involved. He's getting wind that there's people doing research, and this is all starting to feel like, hey, we probably need to pump the brakes a little bit. Let's take it easy. Right. We've been successful and have been around as long as we have because we are not out there at the forefront on anybody's top 10 list, and I don't want to get there.
Right.
And it seems like everybody's fine with it, with the exception of Kassav, right? He's the single voice of dissent here, doesn't want to do that. He feels like, hey, we should just be able to take advantage of the paths and no one's going to see us. And so they kind of take this to a vote. The eye is technically the vote breaker, the tiebreaker. So it's 2 versus 2. He gets to break the tie and says, we're not going to do it. But then Lorna comes around and she's like, oh, well, hey, I'd like to go do something. And he lets her do it because it seems pretty innocuous, right? We're going to go down to a planet. There's a family that's there. They have some wealthy ties. We're going to kidnap them, hold them for ransom. We'll make a ton of money and we'll get out of there. And he does mention, hey, there's a Jedi, like an outpost there. And she's like, yeah, but whatever. It's not that big of a deal kind of thing. And so he agrees to it, which I really, when I'm reading this, I'm like, this doesn't seem like,
right.
Why would he say no and then say yes? And then later on you find out there was a reason why he said yes, and it's because he's a priest. He's starting to put the plan in place to kind of usurp the power that exists today so that he can be the ultimate power. So more on that later, I guess. Okay, let's talk about Ilforna. So this is chapter 22, the Outer Rim.
There was one last thing I think that was important that we do explanation about the paths. So this is a quote from the book. So the paths allowed crews to use hyperspace in ways denied to every other ship in the galaxy. Microjumps, leaps to locations inside gravity wells, entering hyperspace from almost anywhere. So we get a little bit of an idea both of how hyperspace is working in that, but also just a smidge of an idea of how these paths work. Now, we don't get a lot of explanations behind that, but it was interesting that we've got these gravity well type things, which we've always assumed take you out of hyperspace because you have the gravity wells on the Star Destroyers and things like that. So it's interesting. It's kind of the other way around now, where they've actually found a way to leverage this technology to enable this type of behavior. And you can see why that would make them so powerful and so dangerous. But anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting thing to point out before we moved on.
No, you're absolutely right. And I can't believe I missed that, because that is a whole conversation piece in itself, because you think about the gravity wells in, was it Rebels that they were using them?
Yeah.
To rip ships out of space, hyperspace. There was that moment. I think it may have happened in Resistance at one point.
It was in Legends all the time.
Yeah. I was going to say Legends has a few examples.
It was the interdictor ships. I think it was the ones that had the gravity.
Yes.
I remember.
Yeah.
Right?
They were mounted like on the fronts or whatever.
Yeah. The big balls, I think.
Yep. And what was the other? So that's relevant. And then you think about like the Rise of Skywalker and Poe, right, doing those little mini hyperspace jumps, and you think that, okay, this is how they're explaining some of that, and this is the same thing. I don't think they've actually drawn that exact conclusion so far, right, but that seems to line up with what is being described here, if you ask me.
I'm glad you saw it too. Yeah, light speed skipping with these micro jumps seem to have some sort of correlation between it.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite the same, because he seemed to be just doing dumb luck, but that's why it at least seems semi-possible, I guess. But there's still a vast disconnect there. But on to chapter 22, as we get long in the tooth here on the night.
So 22 is the Outer Rim. So this is the Elfrona outpost. And this is where we get to, and Elfrona actually came up before. So this is from the image that I've got up right now. And it's almost described to a T in the book, A Light of Jedi, with this picture here. And this is from the Kylo Ren comic book that came out a year before, written by none other than Charles Soule. Right. And so this is where Luke and Ben Solo and who was the other one that went there? I forget now. They went there to go look for Jedi relics and that kind of thing. That's a whole other story. But it was cool that they kind of came back to this as well. But we are, this is the moment I think we've all been talking about for a very long time. But you've got the characters here on the right, Loden, Greatstorm, and Bell Zettifar. They're up on a cliff, and he's trying to think about whether to jump or not. And Loden just force pushes him right off the cliff. And on the way down, he's thinking about all these things, and basically his life is kind of flashing before his eyes, and he's hoping that it's just going to come to him. And you realize he's got no time left, and there's really no way it's going to come to him. And suddenly he just stops and doesn't hit the ground, doesn't splat on the ground. And you come to find out it's because Adira Strokes, who's the one on the left-hand side here, she was down there waiting because Loden said, go down there and wait just in case. So she was acting like a safety net of sorts, and stops him with the force from, killing himself. But it does set the stage for him to he's realizing like, man, I'm not, and I don't know if I'm ready for this, right? I can't get this thing down. And there was that joke about, hey, we'll throw you off a building when we get back to Coruscant. Right. Some really great heights, give you a lot to think about.
Right. Yeah. Long way down.
Long way down. A lot of time to think about it. Yeah. So it was good. Their whole chemistry, I think, is really great. And it kind of jumps around. This chapter jumps between this and then the Blythes. So the Blythes are the family that were mentioned in the last chapter by Lorna, and they are a family of four. There's a father. There's Otto, the father, Erica, the mother, and they've got two children, B and Ron. I think who are both, or one's 13, Ron's 13. I forget how old the girl is. And the mother, and they've they're kind of like pioneers, right? They've got money. They had money. They came out here. They've kind of built their I just lost Jonesy. They've built their whole family and all their worth and everything, though. They've just kind of set up shop here in this really unknown part of the region, in this really small town or small area. It's not even, I think it's like I think they mentioned it's like several miles away from the main town there on Elfrona. And so the mother, they're kind of working out in the fields, doing what they do. And suddenly Jonesy's back, and suddenly there's this storm, and the mom sees the storm coming. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's the vision, right? The visual of a storm approaching. And so the father looks up and notices it, and he's obviously been keeping up with current events. He's heard about storms, and he's probably familiar with the Nile and kind of how they operate, and immediately tells her to head inside with the kids. We got to get in quickly because it's not safe. And I think he sees some figures there just before they head in.
Right.
Excuse me. So they run inside. They get inside there. They've got basically, I kind of assume it's an escape room, right?
It's like a bunker.
Yeah. That's probably a better word, but yeah, a bunker. And they run inside. They lock up, and the father notices that there's 10 figures that start to emerge from this cloud, and they're making their way towards the house, they mentioned the Steelies, which we'll talk about here in a minute. These are like these metallic horses, and some of these Steelies are laying dead there, so they've already killed the horses. They bunker down. Suddenly, there's gas in the house, right? So they're gassing the house at this point. And the father can see that the Nihil have they've got infrared, so they've got their helmets on. They can see through the gas, which is kind of a cool thing. And Ron, the older kid, the 13-year-old, is on the comm link, and he's trying to call somebody for help. So he's calling the local protection agency or whatever. I forget the name of it, what it's called, but he's calling, trying to get a hold of somebody. Say, hey, help! We're kind of in trouble here. Erica does something pretty neat. Like the mom is, she suddenly pulls up a data pad. She takes control of some of these worker robots out there. She sends one of them to kind of bash the speeder that they came in on, so that kind of disables that. She sends another one out there to try to attack she's basically using these droids that are like harvesting droids or worker droids to kind of as robots to attack them. But of course, the Nihil they're well armed and take out all of these things. I think there's one that gets by and starts bashing in again that speeder, and that's kind of it. So they're really just kind of at a loss here in terms of what to do.
I think they still took out like 4 of them though, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they successfully managed to kill like 4 of them when it was all said and done. And I think she detonates that last one somehow. Right. She detonates it to kind of blow up that speeder, if I'm not mistaken. And then Ron. So this is where it comes in. So Ron makes contact with somebody at Ogden's Hope. It's Ogden's Hope Security is what it's called. But they choose not to go. He tells them, hey, we think it's a Nihil. And they're like, yeah, no thanks. Good luck, kid. You're on your own. So they don't send out any help. And this plays a huge part a little bit later. So then we cut back over. And again, this is kind of cool because it is cutting back and forth in this chapter. It cuts back over to Porter Engle, which became a fan favorite for a lot of people as they were reading this.
One of the coolest names ever, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
He's an Ikruki. Here was what I came up with like I don't know. This is really hard to find anything like it, but
that's pretty good.
Farm down here on the right-hand corner, if you will. But this is Porter Engle. So this is some art that there's a prominent fan that's been doing this stuff here on the left-hand side, and this is from the comic books about a year ago, I think. So, excuse me, for an Ikruki. So Porter Engle served on the Jedi Order for over 300 years. So we've got a real seasoned veteran in our ranks here. He was a teacher. He was an explorer. He was a diplomat, a warrior. He's kind of worn all the hats. He's probably done everything he can do, at the Jedi Council, at every level of Jedi. And he's kind of retired now. And they kind of it's kind of cool. They get to kind of pick what they want to do when they retire from the council.
Right.
And he decided to, some go out and vacation and just kind of take it easy, but he wanted to stay active. And so he asked to be, stationed at an outpost. And so now he's been relegated to chef is really what he does. He just gets to, make food and hang out with Jedi that are much younger and go on, side adventures with him if they will. But they do consider him a legend. So I'm more excited about this character than a lot of the other ones because I just want to hear more about what he does in some of his past works. And we get to see him actually in action a little bit later.
Yeah, and we get the sense from him, though, that he misses the action. There's a part of him that still yearns to be involved. And that's why he didn't want to leave the order. He still wanted to have sort of in touch, but he also knows nothing happens out here. And you sense the struggle. And even when things start to escalate, you still sense the struggle for a time until we get to see who the Blade of Bartata is. Right. So you got to say it all fancy like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see that transition for the character. He knows. And again, we also get this idea that his use of the Force is diminished. And or at least that's what he feels like. If you don't use it, you lose it type of thing. And that's still an interesting concept to me because I'm still curious how true that really is, or if you're just rusty. So we've heard it a couple times now, and so I'm curious if that's really a thing. But yeah, again, it was really cool to see the change of the character, especially so quickly. And Bell gets to see him in action and see just why he was so revered in his prime.
Yeah, right. I mean, he shows no signs of, by any means, of being old or incapable of doing some things, right? We should note also there, and it's captured here on that. You can kind of see it there, but he's got a scar over his right eye, so he's only got one eye, which you would think it puts him at a disadvantage. But you've got Kanan with no eyes, and he did just fine.
When you have the Force, you can see everything you need.
Yeah, So they receive the Jedi receive a distress call, and it's an emergency comm coming from an emergency comm system from an unknown source. And this is where it's key, right? Unknown source. Somebody's calling us in saying, hey, there's a family that's in need. They're in help. They're being attacked by the Nihil. The Nihil is mentioned by name. And of course, this sets everybody off there, right? All of these guys are suddenly like, holy crap, look, we got to get out there quick. And they all decide to head out. They take Ember along, which is the Charhound, which, another cool character concept kind of thing. But yeah, and I'll spoil it, right? So when Marchion Rose said, no, we're not doing anything. And then 2 seconds later, Lorna comes back and says, hey, but can I do this one thing? And he says, oh yeah, that's fine. Well, it's because he's the guy that calls in this distress signal, right? He's setting all of this in motion for his own gain a little bit later. And we'll eventually get to why all this happens. But that's why it didn't make sense initially, because it was all part of a plan that we weren't supposed to know as readers of the book. So I'm spoiling it, and too bad. All right. Yeah, and you mentioned the Blade of Bordata is what they call Porter Engle, which we get to see a little bit later. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to chapter 23. So we're on Naboo, which didn't see that one coming as I was going through
either.
Yeah. And this is a pretty short chapter, but it opens with Chris and Man. Do I have a picture? No. Yeah, so Avar, Chris, and Man are looking at the Varakino, which is the same island from the Phantom Menace, right, where Anakin and Padme were married. They're looking at that island, and they make mention of an artist that's there and stuff, which is, it's all cool. I mean, it's a good way to tie it in. I was trying to think, like, why would they bring in Naboo? And I've never really honestly looked into Santeca's background. If he was born there, originated there, I don't remember his background, honestly.
I don't remember.
The only thing I could think is this is it's probably a very expensive place to live, right? You can't just go move out here. And so if you think about it, with the amount of wealth that they have because of all of their charting of hyperspace routes and lanes and that sort of thing, they probably have a ton of money, and this is where they would go. They seem like they're kind of like uppity up type class people with their money.
Right. I think it's important still, and we've talked about this before, it's important that they still bring in things that we're familiar with, and that they still exist in the galaxy. And they also help us visualize just a little bit, help kind of root us and give us something we feel like we know, and we don't have to learn everything. So I think it's a good move to continue to bring in little things that it can at least see a little bit in our vision. And we got to see a lot of Naboo over the course of Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace. Yeah.
And Battlefront 2. That was like one of my favorite moments when you got to go jump around there.
Storm the city.
Yeah, storm the city. Oh, that was a lot of fun. All right, so they were introduced to the two more Santecas. So this is a husband and husband couple named Marlo and Velis Santeca. They are the scions of the Santeca Empire, which I thought was like, wow, they've got an empire. And we learned again, kind of like at this point, there's been another emergence now that's occurred in the ring light system, and this killed like 7,000 people. So it's still continuing to go on. We learned that, of course, they charted the galaxy a long time ago. That's where their family kind of cut their teeth and made their money. We talked about selling those routes to traders, governments, entrepreneurs, right? Anywhere that anybody needed hyperspace travel, they made their money on that. And they were also responsible for setting up hyperspace toll lanes and charge for the download of data. So again, in order to get anywhere, you've got to pay a toll lane to get some data so that you can travel through hyperspace. And somehow they found a way to get their 2 cents for every jump and just made a crap ton of money on that, right?
Art imitating reality.
Exactly right. And again, they're wildly rich. But so to kind of boil down this conversation that Avar Chris is having and Elzar Mann are having with them, they basically say, look, they've looked at the findings. They can assure the Jedi that there couldn't be anything possible in the hyperspace lane. In fact, they say that twice. There's no way something can be in the lane for hyperspace. And you think about it, they've got a self-interest, right? By saying that, yeah, it is possible, then they kind of diminish, right, their work, right? To some extent, like, hey, we're the experts here. We've told everybody that hyperspace travel is safe. Everybody believed this. That's why they paid us the money. They're not going to come back and say, oh, well, yeah, it's kind of safe. And we can't explain why there would be something in there. So they double down and say, yep, there's no way. Should never have happened. Again, Mann's thinking about Elzar Mann's trying to use Jedi mind trick to kind of convince them or talk to them. Thinks twice about it. And then we get some more explanation around hyperspace, that it's a bubble of time space that nothing else can interact with, because each land is, as far as we can tell, its own distinct plane of existence.
Right.
Like, we're getting into like the definition now, some really scientific terms that were relative to us, but they are really, pulling back the curtain on hyperspace and how it works. Right, we're going into a
Right.
planes of existence, which again, that kind of speaks to the light speed skipping that we were seeing. Right, they were kind of traveling literally between different planes of existence and areas within the galaxy when he was doing all of that.
And also starts to ask questions or more questions about the world between worlds too.
Yeah, well, I thought
Is it-
about that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
like no,
'Cause
go ahead.
that definition could be applied to world between worlds too. It's just a more permanent space in time or between time, I guess, really, or outside of time. So yeah, I thought about that too. It was just a curious thing. What's interesting with the Jedi mind trick and Elzar Mann, two people that we always learned that the Jedi mind trick was only useful on the weak minded, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these are two, presumably, or three people with the senator and the two sort of Santekas that are presumably not weak minded.
Right.
So it's curious that he feels confident enough to be able to use that, but everything that we know about it is likely not going to be effective.
Yep. Yeah. So Elzar and Avar Chris, they leave and they're not convinced, right? They're like, there's something,
Yeah,
they're hiding
they're
something.
hiding
Got to be
something.
hiding something.
Right.
And then we cut over to them being the Santekas, and they're talking about how, they're alone and that they're convinced that these are signs that somebody is behind this. And they allude to it, being a family member, like some tragedy, right? Somebody that they knew a long time ago. And the other guy's like, well, yeah, but she would be beyond ancient at this point.
Yeah.
And that's all we get, which is, it gets into a whole creepy, like really macabre kind of storyline with who they're talking about, Marie Santeca, which we're going to talk about here in just 1 second.
Chapter 24.
In chapter 24. Yeah. And I keep forgetting to go through my little visuals. There you go. There's hyperspace. There's Santeca. Okay. Chapter 24. We're back on the Gaze Electric.
Mm-hmm.
So Marchion Ro's ship. And now we're with Marchion Ro and Marie Santeca, who is, in the family. And they said she's over 100 years old, but we never got a definite age for her that I remember. And visually, she's sitting inside this like large medical capsule. So excuse the imagery here, but this is the best I could find. But she's sitting in this medical capsule that's got all of these tubes going in, and she's essentially on life support. Like she's well exceeded where she should have shuffled off this mortal coil long ago, and she's still alive because Marchion Ro and likely his father have been keeping her alive because of her unique talent, her unique ability. She is able to do what 10,000 droids cannot do today. Right. When they're talking about him, when he's talking about building a way to kind of chart all of this stuff and what we think will eventually become like astromech droids and the computation power that needs to exist, you've got somebody like Marie Santeca who just naturally has this ability to do it all. So they've been keeping her alive on life support, literally enslaved, right? For all intents and purposes, she's just enslaved, and she is she's a navicomputer. That's how she's acting right to this day, and they're using that to not only plot courses within the galaxy, but then she's also she knows how to traverse the paths, which are these kind of like back lane ways of getting from place to place that don't use traditional hyperspace methodology or the no space that they kind of just hang out in, which is not hyperspace, it's not normal space, it's just somewhere else, it's on another plane. So I mean, they have the ultimate protection and the ultimate hideout in that, and it's all because of Marie Santeca.
Yeah, I called her Mari for some reason, Mari, but I'll have to get someone to confirm that which one it is. But actually, I think the visual you have here is really good. All the tubes, and because this is actually somewhat similar to what I had in my head as I was reading through it. But yeah, what's curious is Mari's got a bit of an attitude problem too. Like she's kind of that stubborn old woman or stubborn old person a bit too. And yeah, it's clear that she's beyond failing. And Marchion already gets this sense of the days are numbered and he needs more of it, but she's doing so much that it's interfering with other things as well. And so where he has to actually shock her out of it because she's just going crazy with it. But what the visual I had about this, Albert, and maybe you had the same length, her abilities, I mean, presumably they're somewhat force derived is a potential.
Yep. I would say
but there's also very reminiscent of the children. Oh, I forgot what they were called.
Yep.
But they are the kids who would do navigation and stuff like that, right? And so it was very familiar with that for me from reading the Thrawn novels. And so I think that's a really cool idea. And I was hoping they would explore that again at some point, which I don't think we have. But so I like that we've got something like this, that it's from a person and it's not necessarily from a computer, and that there are all these escape routes and these hatches basically in space and time that they can, plot the courses. But Martian sees the writing on the wall. He knows that the days of her are numbered, and his value comes from the paths. So he's got a bunch stored in the background, though. He's not playing all his cards. He's saving all the good stuff for himself because he knows this is all on borrowed time now. And that's why it's time to put his plan. We start to get a feeling of, okay, there is something churning here that he begins to feel the need to start acting on. As we'll get some confirmation of that soon, but we start to get this premise that there is something churning in his brain and turning, that it's now time to put into effect.
Yeah. Yeah. They were called the Skywalkers. I was trying to think of their like native name. It was like the Oz, I want to say Aussies, but it's not Aussie. It was something like that. I can't remember, for the Chiss navigators that were, I think they were force sensitive too.
I think that was what we were alluding to. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, she's definitely, no, she's not Chiss, but your point is well taken. Like I think she's force sensitive in some way, or she's just some kind of savant, right? And she's able to make these computational type things at a level that no one else can. And she's been doing this ever since she was 6 years old, right? So this is something and we don't have any kind of sense of time in terms of how long.
Has she been in this fight since she was 6 years old? You think that was accidental?
No, probably not.
Or coincidental?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah. But she is, and it's sad for me on a personal level because there's one thing that really just churns me is like elder abuse and how prolific this, it just happens everywhere, unfortunately. And that's kind of what's happening here. Like he's shocking her and he just keeps shocking her. And, he wants to choke her out. He's probably tired of her. And she's senile. She's not all there. At one point she was looking at him and she couldn't tell if that was, his father, or his father, or his grandmother, or sometimes her son. She sees him as the business partner, right? So her mind's really just kind of lost at this point, and unfortunate. But it's
almost like a subconscious thing for her.
Yeah,
she slips into some state in order to do whatever she's doing.
Yeah, and then like you said, he shocks her to get her out of that state because he needs something from her. And it's sad because she's under the guise that they're doing this for the Republic. Right. Like she thinks that she's on the good side here and they're still charting routes and stuff. So whenever he comes to her and says, hey, I need a path to do something, she thinks it's for the better of the galaxy. And that's far from the case. Right. He's doing some pretty mischievous stuff here. And like you said, there's a master. Rose says he's got a master plan of redemption and revenge for what happened to his father. And he talks to Marie about it. So he almost confides in her because he knows that she doesn't have any outside contacts, and if you haven't read the book, what's happening here is he's keeping her isolated. Like the Tempest, they know they come to him for the paths, but they're not like in direct contact with her, right? She's kind of like the Great Oz. She keeps her locked away. And, again, like you said, that's his power. And without her, he wouldn't have a whole lot. And this comes up a little bit later. He starts to realize like, hey, this is all I got. And
only a few people know about her. Right.
Yeah. So he asked her a question. He says, can the Republic determine where the rest of the pieces will emerge, including the flight recorder? So he poses this question to her, like, are they going to be able to find this, find this out? And can you find this out for me? And she can. Like, she's like, yeah, I can do that. And then she makes that comment about like, hey, you work me more than your father ever did. Which grinds at him because and not only that, he's getting it from her. So Marcion Rowe, and this is all building up, right? So Marcion Rowe is getting it from her about, hey, you're not as good as your father, right? You're living in the shadow of your father. And then he gets it from the Tempest, right? Later on, they're taking cheap shots at him about how he's not his father. And you got to feel like this is really starting to feel like anger him so much that he, takes a step that he does and kills people and all that. But yeah, she says that she's able to determine it. She just wants to eat first. But she's going to be able to find out, she's going to be able to kind of predict where these emergencies are going to come from. And he thinks about it and says, okay, well, there's got to be a way that we can exploit that, right? If we know where these things are going to emerge, then there's got to be some way that we can take advantage of that. So he calls in Pan, Kazza, Lorna, says that he's going to start providing them with the locations of the remaining emergencies and for that plan itself. And, Kazza immediately pushes back and says, going back to, pushes back on giving 1/3 to Marcion. He's like, look, if we're not going to use the paths anymore, if you're not going to let us, if we're going to go make all these runs, I don't think we need to pay you 1/3 of what we've been getting, as we have been. And so the Marcion in return says that, how about you get no paths after this, if that's the case? And so they're kind of, right, they're vying for power here. They're vying, he's trying to leverage the fact that he's got this because it is really the only thing he's holding on to. But you can start to see that the struggle and the leadership shift just a little bit here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we start to see just the rift that really he's kind of coordinating a bit between them right now as well.
No, that's a good point. He's pitting them against each other.
Right. And he's got some suspicions about his father's death. Of course, you had spoken about earlier. And we get a little bit of clarity of that here in the coming chapters as well.
Yep. And dang it, I have not been clicking these slides. All right. Chapter 25, the last chapter we've got here. And so we're back on Elfrona, and the Jedi are back on their way from the Blythe homestead. So they're heading to the Blythe homestead, and they're in a Jedi vanguard. So this is, and I couldn't find an image of this thing, and I really wish, I hope we get to see these in the comics or they come up again, but I'm envisioning like this really massive looking van, right? Of some sort that's got a big turret laser on the front, like the Vectors. This is a vehicle that is operated, and the ignition is essentially the lightsaber. They've got to put the hilt in there and use that to start this, which again is cool. I like the idea. Maybe we'll see more vehicles the same way. But it was interesting that they said it was wheeled, tracked, or repulsor lift. So it can do all three of them depending on the situation and what they need to do. It's amphibious, it's submersible, so they can go underwater with this thing. They had 2 seats up in the front, a large passenger area in the back, and could be controlled by their application or through the use of force, not literal force, but the force, right? So they can remotely control these things as they can do the Vectors, as they can do the Veils, which was another thing that I don't know. I had a hard time envisioning this one, and I read this a few times, but it feels like it's just like a pogo stick with some wings, which is not the coolest vision for me, but whatever. I get it. It's supposed to be agile, and because you're controlling it with the force, it can do really cool stunts and tricks and things. But it's a flying thing with wings and on a pole. Is that how you envisioned it? I was going to draw it, and I was like, no, I'm not. This is going to be terrible. I'm not doing that.
I was totally lost as to how to visualize this thing. But the idea behind it was cool and we get a little sense of the Jedi have a lot of influence over the vehicles that they purchase and that they buy and the contracts that they do. And their idea is to make it as multi-purpose as possible, as many situations they can craft around it so that they have the tools they need for anything that comes up. And they think through that, very, very thoroughly, or as thoroughly as they can. And then they do revisions to those things over time as well. So I thought it was more, I was more focused on that aspect of it. But yeah, these things are kind of a jack of all trades and can do a number of things. But man, the visualization of this, I just gave up after a few minutes of trying to reread this over and over.
We're like, okay, Indira's flying. So as they're approaching the homestead of the Blythes, they see smoke on the horizon. They know something's gone down. And so that's when Indira jumps out, and she gets in one of these these veils. And she flies off ahead to go figure out what's going on, scout ahead, while they continue on in the vanguard. They show up, and this entire time, like Porter Engle is like meditating, like he's almost transforming himself back into like this old version of himself, just prepping himself, like he's psyching himself up for the battle or a potential battle here, which I thought was really cool because you got somebody like what's his name? Still trying to get all these stinking names down. Zettifar.
Oh, yeah, Bell.
Yeah. So Bell's sitting there watching him, and he's like freaking out because he's never seen Porter Engle like this. Like he's in a trance. Like, again, that very transformational trance. This is all part of that blade of Bordota. So they get there, and they get to the homestead. It's on fire. Neither Bell nor Loden can sense anybody around. So it sounds like something's going on. And Porter jumps out, and he's like forensically determines, using the force and probably his own just wisdom and skill, that there were 6 people remaining, that 4 of them were captive people and 2 of them were the kids. So a total of 4 adults, 2 kids that left the homestead. And so they decide they're going to go ahead and follow that path. And they notice that on the door that the Nihil had left their mark. And so that those 3 lines that we talked about earlier on the ships, the 3 lightning bolt symbols, are now on the front of the door. So they're kind of leaving their mark to let everybody know the Nihil were here, right, as a deterrent or intimidation or whatever. And it's suddenly that it's then that you kind of, and this is what I was able to find here. They get attacked by these mole mines, and so these are kind of like mines that are able to traverse underground. You can kind of see, if you think of like Big Bugs Bunny as he's approaching anywhere, and you can see the mound of dirt. That's how I envision this. And these things spring out and they detonate, which they were quite a bit of a problem. Like Loden goes to his default of using telekinesis and shooting these things up in the air. That was really cool. You've got Porter Engle, who's just, he goes completely, crazy, and taking these things out. But yeah, they're kind of blowing up, and then they're in the midst of all this battle. One sneaks up underneath the Vanguard and blows that whole thing up, and so they're now without a Vanguard at this point, which is really just an excuse for Charles Soule to write that there's a cavalry coming. The cavalry is about to come in here. But let me pause there. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the action really starts to pick up, right? This is where things start to get really interesting. And I don't know if we were clear about this. So if you're thinking, well, the Nile already on a ship and back to where they're going. So when the mom blew up the speeder, that was their only way in or out. So they had to take some of the steelies, right?
Yeah.
The horses, basically, and they're starting to ride out there, and they're not very proficient. This is where forensic Porter Engle comes into effect. Yeah, we've got a great visual here of almost a Attack of the Clones type of inspired the cover of Light of the Jedi, one of the alternate covers, I believe. And so so he deduces deducts that they're not going to make progress. They're not very proficient. They're not making, so they can catch them. And so on the speeder, they already start to make progress. But we also know that a Jedi on any kind of animal, they're going to be able to coax it into to do some different things. But so we've got to go find some of those.
Yeah. And so he goes out and saddles up 3 steelies, and he talks to them, which was really cool. Like he actually is talking to them. Hey, and I forget I don't know if it's this chapter or the next one, but he's talking to them saying, hey, we really need you. We love you. You guys are awesome. He's kind of hyping them up. And we saw this with Ezra a lot, right? That ability. And I forget what the Force power is called now. But that ability to be able to communicate with animals and empathize with creatures is certainly a Jedi trait that we see at play here once again. And another cool thing is Loden goes out to the wreckage of the Vanguard. He rips off this like 4-foot pole, or what looks like a 4-foot pole. It's basically the cannon. They don't really tell you that in this chapter, and takes it with him, which I thought was cool. And he's going to use this thing a little bit later in a really cool way. And then when Porter shows up, they saddle up those 3 steelies. They all connect with them personally, and Bell gets to use one of his gifts, which is kind of like a tracker, I guess. One of his force abilities is to be able to kind of sense where people are and the direction and all of that. And so they literally mount up on these steelies that you can see here that we're showing and head off in pursuit of the Nihil, who have the family in the back of a cart, right, or some kind of a prison cart of some sort.
And in case you're worried, Ember survived the explosion. Ember's okay, so he's there with him. Everything's cool. Ember's still alive. Yeah. So just in case anybody's concerned, he
gets his revenge a little bit later.
Oh,
but and this like, I love this book, and I don't have it available. I ordered this just for the socks, and that's 100% true.
I don't think anybody would doubt you.
But I did order this book just for the socks. But the cover I do love, and the only thing I'll say about the cover of this book is like this scene doesn't happen. Unfortunately, like I was like, wow, this is really neat. They're gonna come charging at each other on steelies, and it doesn't really happen that way. But whatever.
No one would be that dumb though, right?
I'd like to see it.
Right. I think there's actually 4 Nile though.
You're talking about, I think there's only 3 that are shown here.
Yeah. I think we were maybe saying there were only 2, 4 of the family members and then 2. But I think there's I think there's a total of 4 Nile that are
alive still.
There. Yeah, alive.
No, you're right, because
we'll get some clarity around that here when the action starts to kick up.
Yep. And spoiler alert, they're all going to die. Well, most of them.
Most of them, yeah. But again, we're starting to see things pick up. The momentum of the book is starting to gather some steam. We're starting to get a little bit of conflict. We're starting to see the pieces starting to come into place, and the Jedi start to understand and get a direct exposure to the Nile. And the strikes keep doing their lightning thing, which is just a calling card. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's good. We're starting to get this pace, and we're a little over halfway through, I believe. So I think there were around 40 chapters. Is that right? Something like that. So
yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so this is where things start to pick up, and really good pace. The pacing is still fantastic in this book. And now we're going to get to see the Blade of Bartot. It's going to be amazing.
Yes. All right. So that'll do it, I guess, for this part of the show. We'll come back next week, and we're going to hit chapters 27 through 35, and then we'll have 36 through 44, and that'll bring us to the end there. Yeah, and I would agree. Like right now, there was a lot of action happening up until the whole Hetzel system and recovering all the pieces, and then it kind of slows down. We get a lot of buildup again. We're introduced to the Nile, so this is why the show went a little bit longer. There's just a lot to take in, and then from here on out, again, it starts to pick up once we get into 27, 35, and then certainly by the end of it, it's just boom, 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 everything happening in pretty rapid succession there. So good stuff. Okay, I think that's it. I want to plug the show that we've got coming up from a certain point of view. That'll be out here very soon. We're recording that in 2 days, so look forward to that as probably a bonus episode. It may just come out on the feed along with these other ones that we're still doing. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And I don't know, anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, when we get it out there, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys think. We've appreciated the feedback we've got on these shows as well. So continue that. And thanks for everyone on the live stream that tuned in and stuck with us for almost 2 hours. We love you and we appreciate you, and hope it was worth losing a little sleep over.
Yeah.
And of course, if you want to join us on Discord, eargluemedia.com/Discord, we're always in there talking. There's been some fantastic discussions going on, some spoilers discussions at times as well, across a variety of subjects, not just Star Wars. So if you're just not wanting Star Wars for a day, there's also stuff there for you as well. But although I don't understand why you would want something other than Star Wars, I don't get you.
Memes, serial talk.
A lot of WandaVision talk lately as well.
A lot of WandaVision, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of WandaVision. Yeah, fun show so far. And but yeah, we'd love to see it. Love to see on the streams. We got it on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. So whichever platform is your preference, come check us out and interact with us.
Yep, agreed. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.